Thank you. Yeah, thank you. So what made me raise the alarm that Wolbachia bacteria might be suitable for a bioweapon? Might as well get straight into it. The NATO definition of a biological agent is a microorganism or a toxin derived from it which causes disease in man, plants or animals, or which causes the deterioration of material. They include bacteria, viruses, rickettsiae, chlamydia, parasites, fungi and toxins. And in this scenario of a release, we have nearly all of them. The host mosquitoes rely on human blood for reproduction. They will carry bacteria and viruses. The Wolbachia was found to be already present in the human body in our parasites, specifically the common roundworm and its threadworms. And I quote, "The filary are thread-like parasitic nematodes, roundworms that are transmitted by arthropod vectors, mosquitoes." Taylor's research, it goes on to say, Wolbachia, in the inflammatory pathogenesis of human filariasis, concluded filarial nematodes, these roundworms, cause some of the most debilitating disease in tropical medicine. But wait for this. Recent studies, however, have implicated the parasite's endosymbiotic Wolbachia bacteria rather than the worm itself as the cause of inflammatory-mediated filarial disease. It was the Wolbachia that made it so dangerous and made people so ill. Furthermore, there is a drug, doxycycline, which is effective on Wolbachia and subsequently on the worm's fertility, but not on the worm itself. In 2001, it was shown that the adverse reactions observed after treatment may be caused by the release of Wolbachia from destroyed worms. These bacteria manipulate the fertility of their host. Now, they mean the parasites, but what with gene transfer, with any amount of gene transfers, horizontal gene transfer, every sort of interaction that goes on in the microbiome in the body, it's not a far cry, and the possibility of it being in our water, it's definitely not a far cry to think that something could affect the female of our species, and in fact, the male of our species, because they also, I think, have a mechanism, Wolbachia has a mechanism that the feminization of males of the species. We don't want that. So, as all species host parasites that host Wolbachia, it would be impossible to test the countless interactions like digestion, infection, horizontal gene transfer, adaptations, mutations and transmissions through bites, watercourses, or ecological collapse which could lead to a disease-ridden population. There would be no means of diagnosing which pathogen is responsible in which case. And this is another criteria for a bioweapon, that it creates a situation where there is no means of diagnosing which pathogen is responsible. The host mosquitoes are parasites and will carry bacteria and viruses. Which I've said. What is worse is that these bacteria and the pathogens are passed down through generations. This is almost the most important point of this whole presentation, which should immediately be a red alert and stop this project right away. Not only will every single offspring, child, descendant of mosquitoes have this Wolbachia bacteria that has been bred into them, originally micro-injected in culture that could absolutely lead to antibiotic resistance, but down the line they will always have this. But also a study found in 2013 that all mosquito eggs carry the same diseases, pathogens as the parents did, carried on through generations. NATO goes on to cite mass production. A bioweapon needs to be produced at scale without the loss of pathogenicity, making microorganisms effective as they are self-propagating. You need effective delivery. A biological agent typically needs to be deployed quickly and en masse to achieve its maximum impact before effective countermeasures can be deployed. Is that maybe why we have only been given 1 month's notice that they intend to deploy these mosquitoes? They need to be environmentally robust. A biological agent needs to be able to survive in the environment and spread. A gene drive meets all those criteria. No less serious in terms of Wolbachia is the common knowledge, actually, that people develop an intolerance if they get too many stings from a bee or any other insect, or they get too many bites from a mosquito, or if it's also been known in terms of food allergies. So if they receive this large amount of stings or bites, it triggers an immune system response to the toxins and an ongoing sensitivity. That is an accident waiting to happen in a world where we already have a huge amount of autoimmune reactions going on. Also, we had to deal with the situation that there is some misinformation being spread, a fear-mongering very similar to what we met with during the pandemic. The WHO, the World Health Organization, has said that they've highlighted the risks of unintentional migration. And the need potentially for a vaccine to deal with, because of climate change, there's been an unintentional migration, unexpected, and the reality is that mosquitoes don't migrate. They just don't do it. So it's like introducing the idea that we've got a choice between vaccine or mosquitoes, and it's also saying that the mosquito system isn't going to work, actually, and it's also saying this idea that mosquitoes are on the move, that they're doing their own thing now, when actually the very, very actual truth of the matter, with even just a cursory look at the research or at the life cycle, is that Aedes aegypti, the mosquito we're considering, doesn't actually fly or move in any shape or form more than 300 meters from where it's born. And the most that any mosquito travels is 3 kilometers. So when we talk about the risks of unintentional or intentional migration, it draws our attention to the involvement of the military governing body DARPA. They organise all the regulation for biosafety of high security laboratories and all genetic releases. And they are concerned that the problem with gene drives and the use of eggs is that they can be dry for 8 months and they can be moved all around the world and used by whoever gets their hands on them, or released as a health strategy in this case. So that's what is completely unacceptable, is that the research shows diseases are passed down to the eggs. The frequency and timing of egg release was important to the transmission of malaria infection into the egg, but consider how mosquitoes produce an average 100 eggs 3 times in their 2 weeks of life expectancy. And those eggs must be in water. Then consider how the mosquito spends a further 2 weeks in water after hatching, feeding on organic matter and eating and being eaten by other species. So there is actually a lot of safety standards and protocols, only in Europe are the ones I know of, that say that it's absolutely imperative and the law that there should not be a release within 500 metres of a watercourse. And you can see the obvious difficulty when these have to be rehydrated and they're being released in built-up areas. And perhaps north, south, east and west of Denpasar actually hold the reservoirs that we're using for drinking water as well. It's certainly the case that when they released these mosquitoes in Maui, that central to the plan was the irrigation company for Maui. So that is something that is a big cause for concern. Although some studies claim that Wolbachia is not present in fish or birds or humans, the VCA Animal Hospital confirmed that the same roundworms which host Wolbachia are found in birds, and the Common Marine Parasites article from the Conservation Government publication confirms that many parasites, including the roundworms, are found in most fish. Dissemination includes inhalation, dermal exposure, and ingestion. So that's just some of the ways that Wolbachia could be dangerous and is actually already present in the environment and already has caused some problems. So I'm sure if I said to you, especially the eminent scientists in the room, that it sounds incredible and just plain wrong to suggest that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation might wanted to deliver mass vaccination using mosquitoes. And I'm sure that it sounds extreme to consider that the Indonesian universities might have been hand-chosen actually, to receive funding so that the amazing scientific breakthroughs would be a cause for national pride and trust, which is helping them now to manufacture consent from the population to accept a massive and continued release of biting and breeding mosquitoes. So, do I think those stories have any credibility and any basis in fact? For that, I had to ask who could benefit from conducting a biological attack and how. So, first of all, I discovered that the university had been working on this research since 2004. I was briefly reassured, but then I discovered that in 2003, just 1 year before, the Gates Foundation had released a mission statement labelled or titled 14 Grand Challenges in Global Health and identified Indonesia as a recipient for generous funding. So, number 3 is develop needle-free delivery systems for vaccines. Just saying. Control insects that transmit agents of disease. Now, they actually say control insects that transmit agents of disease. Whether they mean by that control the spread of the insects or whether they mean remote control with their new AI technology and their interactive nanotechnology, who knows? But it's there on the page. Number 7, develop a genetic strategy to deplete or incapacitate a disease-transmitting insect population. Also, interestingly, they talk about how to measure disease and health status accurately and economically in developing countries, which relates to health certification, develop technologies that permit quantitative assessment of population health status, it's the power to declare another pandemic and how we should respond, and develop technologies that allow assessment of individuals for multiple conditions or pathogens at point of care. So if they're able to get information from point of care, there's going to be the opportunity to restrict where people are allowed to go and allowed to be, which we've met before in the restrictions of the pandemic. The people of Bali are actually already being fed a new narrative that tells us that mosquitoes feed between 6 a.m. and 8 a.m. and then in the evening between 4 p.m. and 8 p.m. This could be the parameters for a new curfew. They're just introducing these ideas. Here in 2023, the World Health Organization have proposed worldwide rules for responding to a pandemic and amendments to the international health regulations, which have been there since 2005, which would give the World Health Organization themselves the power to both declare a pandemic and also override individual nations, governments, and all other medical associations and disciplines in deciding how to respond to the declared emergency. It would be naive to overlook recent statements by the World Health Organization in relation to mosquitoes. One statement said that the migration of mosquitoes due to climate change may require a vaccine program to deal with mosquito-borne diseases. A Maryland university recently studied how quickly malaria antibodies established in a human study, which they said we generated by using mosquitoes exposed to a malaria-causing parasite. They said they did not plan mass vaccination. So I think the main point is that we need to make a choice while we can still make that choice. When that World Health Organization Convention is ratified, which means it comes into effect, they can authorise and mandate the use of any technology they choose and call it a health measure that all countries must adopt. There has been very little resistance to the World Health Organization's convention. They're calling it a pandemic treaty, and maybe because pharmaceuticals are the strongest economy and industry right now, and also the shareholders and sponsors of the World Health Organization are also powerful interests. So Richard used the word nation and nationalism, I think, in the title of this meeting. And I think we have this one opportunity to challenge the World Health Organization by law. I really want to say, come on, Bali. You've been attacked before, hundreds of years ago maybe, but then you decided to protect your paradise island, your royalty, your extraordinary craftsmanship, and your own traditional medicine, empowered by reverence and offerings to the gods. You know the importance of paying your respects, and everyday offerings of Waikru are a priority for everyone. Are you going to disrespect everything that you live for and everything that your public servants in government should be protecting in some sort of reaction only to hurt pride that your universities and greatest minds have been exploited by the offer of funding? The coercion has led to creating a terrifying biological weapon, a plague of mosquitoes. As Dr. Campbell from Ireland and many others warn, in a few months the World Health Organization will be deciding where this technology is deployed. Before the proposed amendments, the World Health Organization need consent from us. That's partly because of people's bodily integrity, that they're not actually allowed to administer health measures to us, and from government states. So they need basically government states to buy and implement these health strategies. But after the amendments, the World Health Organization will implement a rules-based order and all countries will be legally bound to comply. The World Health Organization's own stance on the open-air release of gene drives is that it should take place in steps. The steps they refer to are releasing them on islands before continents to see what is going to happen. There is no way to clean up a contamination of living microorganisms. Unlike toxic chemical spills, the only way containment has been attempted is by burning an area to the ground and further into the soil. We do not have proof yet, but there was a major release of mosquitoes started this year in Maui with 164 drone drops a week and planned for 20 years. 4 months after it started, Maui was razed to the ground by fire. In a more clear-cut report, Sri Lanka welcomed mosquitoes to tackle disease in 2021. And in 2023, the news is multiplying dengue mosquito larvae raises risks for Colombo. Larvae live and feed in water. We do not have proof yet that this particular technology could destroy the environment of every one of the 17,000 Indonesian islands. All we know is that it will be a torment the like of which has never been experienced before. 200 million mosquito eggs a year are planned, each pair laying 300 eggs in their 2 weeks of life, each female requiring a blood meal to produce those eggs. The solution. While we have a choice, we need to veto this release on security grounds, national security grounds, and then use every precedence in law to stop other attacks. Universities need to use every inquiring scientific mind to raise awareness of how unpredictable and unsafe altered species are, how inaccurate these new technologies are in reality, and what an unacceptable risk it would be to pollute the gene pool irreversibly and with it the environment we depend on. Every independent man and woman can contribute something. The government has not invited comments from the public, which is one process they could have used, let alone a planning process with a time period left open for objections to be made. The most powerful things we can do are serve notice on the university, and the word notice is important, rather than just write a letter. So serve notice on the World Health Organization, the World Mosquito Programme, the Gate Foundation, and on local government, stating the risks that you understand them to be accountable for. Send it by registered post and send a copy of your notice to the lawyer that we hope will take this case on. The solution I anticipate is that international law, combined with the common sense and majority pressure, will lead to the disassembling of the World Health Organization and its sponsors, and compensation will be demanded from their huge profits. To move from zero to hero, Joe Jakarta has to make a definitive U-turn and stop its preparations into Panzer with immediate effect. It is unclear what those preparations are. It remains unclear how Wolbachia does what it does even. And it's also unclear why no risk assessment has been required yet. There is a plan to have a factory in Brazil for the mosquito eggs. These will carry all the infectious diseases that Brazil is facing too. With all that uncertainty, any further mosquito or mosquito egg release should be deemed to bring unacceptable and unjustifiable levels of risk. Is anyone else asking, where does the blood come from? I mean, really, blood banks, volunteers, they sometimes say, an industry byproduct, but that is human blood in huge quantities, as every female mosquito has to have a blood meal 2 to 3 days before she will produce eggs. So I say stop and desist, stop and correct. We need this research program to stop the release, break ties with the World Mosquito Programme, to refuse further funding, be supported by the Indonesian government and the trusted men and women here to build a book of evidence, a protected disclosure, and claim compensation. There are other people here who know more about the disposal of Wolbachia, mosquito biomass, and other biohazards in the laboratory. There are others here who have already confronted these issues in the European Parliament, in law courts, and through independent research. They might explain the progression of the World Health Organization, and there's also health and social representatives here who can tell us about other solutions that work and have worked in the past to raise the quality of life of the people, standard of accommodation, quality of water, and improve their overall health and reduce breeding grounds. I look forward to hearing the questions you bring to our esteemed panel of experts as well, and working with you all in a united way to turn this around and create better conditions, not worse. So I haven't saved the best for last because I did mention it before, but possibly the most relevant research I did on mosquitoes led me to a 2013 study in Sweden that proved that mosquito eggs carry the pathogens and drive new diseases. Separate peer-reviewed studies that I looked at showed how malaria is transmitted to eggs, how dengue, how ock elbow, how Zika and yellow fever are all present in mosquito eggs. Just imagine all those diseased eggs being distributed around populated areas. The pathogens won't harm the mosquito, as the immune systems of the entire Aedes aegypti species have been fortified by Wolbachia bacteria. There'll be successful breeding, there'll be no curb on biting. We won't ever know whether we are suffering from dengue, a developed intolerance to multiple mosquito bites, allergic reactions, anaphylactic shock, fever, rash, infection from malaria or from any of the other things. And if, when we take an antibiotic, we get even more seriously ill because Wolbachia has been released into our systems. Doctors won't be able to diagnose the trouble for our weakened immune systems, and no one will be accountable. Right from day one, the very pathogens we seek to reduce will be passing into the water, biodegrading, some will be eaten up, some won't make it and die, they'll pass into the soil, into the parasites of other species, including us. Even studies on Wolbachia, the intended infection, showed how it entered watercourses and caused health issues in humans, including elephantiasis, and river blindness. The risks were proved to be so great that a mass release of mosquitoes was blocked in California this year. So it can be done. The scientists claim that mosquitoes trialled... that was in California, and they argued that the safety tests were just not sufficient. It was impossible to tell what the downstream effects would be. If the scientists here on our panel claim that the mosquitoes were trialled, please remember that they were adult mosquitoes, not eggs. In other countries, that safety protocol is that mosquitoes must not be released near water, and while the eggs and larvae do live in the water. Also, the trial in Yogyakarta found there were less cases of dengue after the release, and secondly, less severe cases of dengue that needed hospitalisation. They said this was promising results, but it's misleading as it suggests that the severe dengue hemorrhagic fever is a severe case of dengue, but it is a distinct and so far very rare strain of dengue. The trial did not find that there were less mosquitoes. The trial did not ask what other diseases were present. The final word should come from the Bioweapons publication, Guidance Notes to the Field Commander on the Consequences of Individual Agents for Continued Operational Effectiveness. A biological agent typically needs to be deployed quickly and en masse to achieve its maximum impact before effective countermeasures can be deployed. This meeting is our countermeasure, as somebody, for some reason, wants those mosquito eggs deployed quickly with no notice to the recipient communities and no governance. Some articles have been saying that it is more financially economical to produce mosquitoes than produce a vaccine. But that is not the choice we face. We don't believe either is a genuine health strategy. We have the choice here to recognise that we are under attack and stand up for ourselves using every human ability and all the energy we have. NATO summary maybe explains what these articles really meant when they wrote, really meant by saying that mosquitoes were economical, when they wrote mosquito releases. NATO's summary maybe explains what those articles really meant when they wrote mosquito releases are an economical option. I quote, "The purely financial advantage of employing biological weapons was clearly illustrated by a 1969 expert United Nations panel, which estimated the cost of operations against civilian populations at $1 per kilometre squared for biological weapons versus $600 per kilometre squared for chemical weapons, $800 per kilometre squared for nuclear weapons, and $2,000 per kilometre squared for conventional armaments." That was the statistics. So I just want to thank you very much for inviting me to speak and for everyone listening. Thanks again.